And this time I'm going to mute this tab so it doesn't start making noise like it did that other time, which was hell embarrassing. Waiting for this to start so I can do that. All right. Or I'm not going to mute the tab. I hate computers. There we go. That's muted. All right. That is a sign that we should begin. Thanks for taking the time to join us this evening for our February meeting of the La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club. It's Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021. I am Mitch Wagner. I am theoretically VP of Communications for the La Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club. I believe that has not been officially started. We have a couple of great guests to speak with us today. Starting off, we'll hear from first-year San Diego Congresswoman Sara Jacobs, who represents the 53rd District. Later, we're going to hear from University of California, San Diego epidemiologist Dr. Rebecca Fielding Miller. As always, we are streaming this on our YouTube channel. So if you have friends or family who can't make it tonight on Zoom, or you experience technical difficulties and have to leave us, you can watch on that YouTube channel. Just search for the Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube. If you have anything you need to bring to our attention, or you notice any technical problem or anybody disrupting the meeting, please message either of my two board colleagues, Evelyn Andrade and Katie Seghetti. Let's begin. I see Sara Jacobs has joined us, so I am going to just welcome Sara. You're unmuted, Congresswoman Jacobs. So.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here with all of you tonight. I know I was supposed to be with you all a month ago on Wednesday, January 6th. I'm sorry I was unable to make it. I was a little occupied at the moment, not what I thought I would be doing on my fourth day in Congress, but here we are. The times have found us. So I'm just so excited to be here with you all. It's so great to be with so many friends and allies and really people who are so dedicated to your community, because that's really how we're going to get out of all of the crises that we're in. So, as I alluded to on my fourth day in Congress, I survived an insurrection. I was actually in the House gallery, in the House chamber, was trapped under my seat, had to put an evacuation hood on, climbing over rails and chairs to evacuate, eventually made it to a safe room, and then felt very strongly that I should go back and continue voting later that night so that we showed that the constitutional process would continue, but also that I could show to myself that this chamber was about so much more than what I just experienced. So we did that. 1 week later, we impeached Donald Trump. And 1 week after that, we inaugurated Joe Biden. So it's certainly been an exciting first month here in Congress. This is actually formally my 1 month anniversary of becoming a member of Congress. I was sworn in on January 3rd. I sit on the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, on the House Committee on Armed Services. Those are my two committees. I'm also the freshman representative to the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, which is the body that does overall policy priorities and committee assignments for the Democratic Caucus. And I'm very honored to be on that. And my priorities in Congress really are, one, to make sure we get a COVID relief bill done. I'm very grateful that President Biden has been pushing us in Congress to do as much and as fast as possible. Just today, we voted on the budget resolution, on the first part of voting on the budget resolution, so we can do budget reconciliation if we can't get Republicans on board. I think there's still hope that we will be able to get Republicans on board, but we're not going to wait for them. And if we have to do budget reconciliation, we will, and we've started the process to be able to do that. Within that, I'm pushing to make sure that we have funding for childcare, that we have the expanded child tax credit, and that we're getting what we need for us here in San Diego to be able to get the vaccines out the door and into people's arms. Being on armed services and foreign affairs, foreign policy, and rebuilding America's standing around the world is another big priority of mine, working with the Biden administration, making sure that we're not just trying to rebuild the international system of the past, but really looking towards what we need for the future. And then, as you all know, childcare, childhood poverty is a passion of mine, and making sure that we are setting up our institutions and our policies to focus on what we're facing right now: climate change, new technologies, all these issues that don't fit neatly into the kinds of buckets that we've had in the past, and making sure we're doing things differently and having a new generation of leaders. So I figure it's much more interesting for you all for me to take your questions instead of just talking about what we're doing here. So with that, I will open it up to questions, and looking forward to hearing what's on all of your minds.
Yes, please enter your questions in the chat. As I just typed in there myself, audience participation is a requirement. I got a couple of questions to while the prompt gets primed. I can't speak now, rented lips. I understand from your associate who helped us set up this meeting that you really just came a few moments ago from participating in an honor and an important event. So could you tell us what you were doing just before you got here?
Yes. So I was the speaker pro tem. I presided over the House floor. I'm one of the youngest women who's ever presided over the House floor. It was a real honor. Obviously, Speaker Pelosi takes very seriously who she appoints to be her speaker pro tem. And I was the first freshman to be asked to do so in our class. So it was a real honor. I was very nervous at first, but I figured it out.
Okay, so we have a question about, let's talk about your plans for Marjorie Taylor Greene. I know we are both Jewish. I never got a space laser. I don't know about you.
Still waiting for my space laser.
It was my, so many jokes about that. I'm not even going there. You actually introduced a resolution. I don't know if it's called a resolution, but a motion to censure her. Tell us about that, please.
That's right. So today, the House Rules Committee voted to strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments. The full House will be voting on it tomorrow, and I will vote for that. In addition to stripping her of her committee assignments, Congressman Jimmy Gomez introduced a resolution to expel her from Congress that requires a 2/3 majority to pass. And then Congresswoman Nikema Williams of Georgia and I introduced a censure resolution, which only requires a simple majority. It's something that's only been used on a number of members through the history of Congress, and really sets in the record books that her behavior is unacceptable and that we are formally censuring her as the House of Representatives. So that only requires a simple majority. We understand that the plan is to escalate. So we're starting with committee assignments and then hoping that Republicans will do the right thing and hold their own accountable. And if not, we can escalate with those various resolutions as needed.
So what's next? We have a question from Jody here. What's next after Marjorie Taylor Greene? What can be done about the other seditionists?
So for Marjorie Taylor Greene, the next step is tomorrow we'll be voting to strip her of her committee assignments. She's currently on Education and Labor and I believe the Budget Committee. I am a co-sponsor of Congresswoman Cori Bush's resolution that calls for an ethics investigation and then the Ethics Committee recommending if there are members and which members should be expelled. I think we need a real investigation into who was involved and what they did. I would be reticent to just make a blanket statement now. I think we do need that investigation and we need to know exactly what happened, and those are ongoing. And so we'll be following the lead of the Ethics Committee, which is the only committee in Congress that has the same amount of Democrats and Republicans, so that it really can be seen as this neutral arbiter of the ethics of the House.
Okay, so it raises a question I wanted to ask, which is when I read the political press, I hear a lot of talk about bipartisanship. And just sitting out here far away in San Diego, I don't really care about that stuff. I want to get stuff done. If the Republicans won't cooperate, roll over them. We're talking about serving the American people here, not serving a minority party. What's your perspective? You're the expert on this subject.
Well, look, as you all know, I ran on being able to work across the aisle to get things done. And there are a number of members of the other party that I do think I can work with. Congressman Peter Meyer of Michigan, who voted for impeachment, is a fellow member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, has worked in international development. I think there's a lot we might be able to do. There's some others like Congressman Blake Moore of Utah. But then, of course, there are the ones who crossed a line, in my opinion, that I think make it more difficult to work with them. I think that the most important thing that we as Democrats and that the Biden administration needs to do right now is actually make a material difference in the lives of people. They need to feel very quickly that their life is better because we're in power. And so I'm hopeful that there are Republicans who will join our efforts to do that. I know that there are a number who actually agree with what we have in the proposal, but I don't think we should wait for them to get on board or let them water down the proposal in some, misguided attempt to get more votes when we can do what we need to do and the American people will feel the difference, and that's what matters to me.
Okay, so many great questions. I'm just going to go through them in more or less random order here.
Okay.
How do you try to align the priorities of San Diego with the national priorities?
It's a good question. So far, there hasn't been a lot of difference, right? Everyone needs vaccine money. Everyone needs state and local funding. Everyone needs to make sure we're getting our small businesses supported and we're getting relief checks out. So far, I think what's in the national interest is in our interest. I serve on armed services, so I especially when it comes to like various basing decisions, I'm sure that there might potentially become a tension. I think there are representatives in Congress, there are like kind of two philosophies that representatives have. One is that you're really there as a representative, that your job is to do what your constituents want. Then the other perspective is that your constituents elected you for your judgment and that you have to lead them. And sometimes that means doing something that's not necessarily popular, but that you believe is the right thing to do, because they didn't elect you to literally represent their positions, but because they trusted your judgment to make decisions on their behalf. I myself am more in the latter category. I think you all elected me for my judgment, for my ability to look at really tough problems and figure out what the best solution is. And so, I'll do what I think is right in every case.
Okay. So what can we expect in the next week with the impeachment trial in the Senate? I know it's a different body, obviously, but can you shed any light there?
Our impeachment managers are doing an amazing job at really making sure everyone remembers what happens and doesn't paper over the real violence that we all faced, and the threat that poses to our constitutional order. We, as the House Democrats, are very focused on maintaining a dignified response. This is not a partisan fight. This is about constitutionality and right and wrong. And so we're staying very focused on that. And I'm hopeful that when it comes to the vote, the Senate will do the right thing. But in any case, I know our impeachment managers have been doing a lot of work and have a lot of great material that they'll be presenting to the Senate and the American public when the trial starts.
Great. So how will San Diego, this is a question about vaccine supplies, how will San Diego get the backlog to catch up with the second doses? We were talking prior to the meeting, a lot of people are not getting their second doses scheduled in a timely fashion. So can you talk about that a little bit?
So there's a couple different components of that problem. And when I was back home last week, I visited 3 of the different vaccine super sites to really get a better understanding of what some of the barriers are. So the first is just the technology to actually do all the scheduling of appointments. They're currently piloting this project called My Turn, which San Diego and LA are piloting. And if it works, will be then scaled to the rest of the state that is supposed to help make those appointments easier. So that's one part. The second part is that in many cases, 1, we don't have enough supply, but 2, what I've heard from providers is actually the predictability of the supply is as difficult for them as the supply itself, because what it means is that they can't open appointments in a timely manner. So they actually will often have enough supply to open more appointments, but by that time, it's too late to get get folks in there. And so they keep them frozen. They do it the next day, what have you. No one in San Diego, from what I can tell, is wasting vaccine. So that's not the issue. It's more just when you have to do it more in that ad hoc way, obviously the process is less seamless. So one of the things that the Biden administration is doing and has asked Congress for funding for is to help make sure that we are not only getting vaccine to the states, which is what was already happening, but that actually FEMA is providing technical capacity within the states to make sure that we're helping with the predictability of that supply. We've also will be allocating additional funding to purchase more vaccines. The plan is right now to have almost by the summer to have almost enough vaccine as we need. And then if there are more vaccines that become approved, then that even helps speed that up faster. So we have to deal with that. And then lastly, there's just a data issue. So in many cases, actually, San Diego is doing better than it looks like, but our data is not transferring. And I'm now working with the state, with the county, and with the federal government to figure out what we can do to help fix some of those data systems.
Good. All right. We have a question about the COVID relief bill. Does it have assistance for renters and homeowners? Many La Masons are struggling on that.
The bill does have assistance for renters and homeowners. It also extends the foreclosure and eviction moratorium. We'll see what ends up staying in the final passage. The House will pass the biggest package we can, and then we'll see what ends up surviving the Senate. Even with a Democratic majority, it's quite slim. So I'm hopeful that that will stay in, and we're pushing to have it stay in, but we don't know yet what the final package is going to look like. Okay.
Let's see. Here's one I don't quite, question. I'm not actually familiar with the issue here, but I'm just going to read it out. Hopefully you are. In regards to education, do you currently have a position on ESSA testing and allowing for testing waivers this year? My follow-up question is, what is ESSA testing?
So ESSA is the Every Student Succeeds Act. It was the kind of fix to No Child Left Behind that passed in 2017. I know that the Biden folks are working now on what kinds of waivers are needed. It would not require, my understanding is it will not require congressional legislation. It will be a decision by the Department of Education. As you probably know, the Education Secretary, Education Secretary designate had their confirmation hearings today. So we will hopefully have a confirmed secretary soon, and then they'll start making those determinations. But if you have specific questions about a specific school in our district, I'll make sure we put information for our congressional office, and you can reach out and we can help figure out for the individual schools in our district what those determinations might be.
Okay. Next one, again, is about Congresswoman Green. If you expel a duly elected member of Congress, do you not then deprive her constituents of their representation rights, no matter how distasteful?
There'd be a special election.
Okay, so the answer to that question is no. We are, let's see, next question is, we're concerned about teachers, K through 12 in particular. If schools open pretty much across the board, how can we be sure teachers get vaccine? And at least one person said that on the chat that they are a teacher and in the classroom now and concerned about that, concerned about their immunity.
It's a concern, and part of the funding that we're going to do in this package, hopefully it stays in the final package, is extra funding to schools to make sure they're able to open safely. Mm-hmm. Part of what the Biden administration is doing is standardizing the criteria for vaccine. Right now, it's basically done state by state, and in California, it's done county by county. So for instance, my youngest sibling, who's a public school teacher in New York City, has gotten a vaccine because New York City has started vaccinating their teachers, whereas here in San Diego, we know that's not necessarily the case. So my understanding is that teachers are in Tier 1B, and that Tier 1B will be opening soon across the state of California, and that there's an effort to make sure that it is more standardized so that it's not differing county by county. If you have an issue with your vaccine and believe you're eligible but haven't been able to get it yet, you can call the county. If you are having issues with the county, I will make sure we put our congressional office in and we can help you with that as well.
Okay, so one of our members said he or she was concerned about Blue Cross and Kaiser taking over the San Diego County vaccine program. Is that a reason for concern?
That's not my understanding. My understanding is we've actually just started getting vaccine directly out to some pharmacies like CVS and Walgreens to begin doing vaccinations, and that the super sites being run by UCSD and Sharp and Rabies are going to continue and expand. Now, I think what you're referencing is that Blue Shield is working with the state on some of the data issues. And that's definitely something that we are monitoring, but by no means will they be the ones running the vaccine distribution, from my understanding. If you see something different, please do send it to my office, because Congress does have oversight authority over that, and we can make sure that it's not being privatized. But my understanding is it will continue going through the, UCSD, Sharp, Rabies, the other folks who are doing these mass vaccine distributions.
Okay, so the next question is about the 2022 elections, whether there was heightened concern among congressional Democrats about that election facing headwinds against the census gained by Trump, redistricting controlled by more Republican legislatures, and the usual difficulties of the first midterm of a new president. Can we get enough tangible help to people to keep up turnout?
Look, I think we're going to hold the House in 22, but I don't think it's going to be easy. We're going to need all of you. So get your rest now, because we're going to need you geared up pretty soon here. I think there's a few reasons why this won't be a normal presidential midterm. Part of it is that we saw in 2018 that we do have a very mobilized community of volunteers that can get out the vote. And so we're counting on all of you to not get tired, to keep going, because we're going to need to keep the House and the Senate for President Biden in 22. But also, truthfully, we didn't do as well in 2020 as we thought we would. And usually you see the midterm backlash when the party in power had a great year in the presidential year, but we didn't have a great year in the presidential year. So there's a chance that backlash doesn't happen in the same way. And I think it will be interesting what happens to Republicans when Trump's not actually on the ballot. We saw in 2018 that helped Democrats. We'll see if that continues the same trend in 2022. We are very concerned about redistricting. Honestly, I don't even know what my new district's going to be, which makes it very difficult to plan. And obviously, because 2020 wasn't as good of a year as we wanted it to be, many states have Republican legislatures that control the redistricting. One of the things that, HR 1, the big bill that we're trying to pass in addition to COVID relief, is a democracy reform bill, the same as HR 1 in 2018 or 2019. That would include a provision to have every state have independent redistricting. There's a question of if that could be implemented in time for this redistricting. The census data keeps getting pushed back, and you can't have redistricting until there's census data. So it's all going to be a bit difficult, and it's going to mean that we're going to have less time to mobilize. So it's going to be hard. I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I do think we're going to hold the House.
Okay. So why do you think we didn't do better in 2020?
I think there's a few reasons. I think that there were a number of seats in Orange County, for instance, where if you're a moderate Republican or a no party preference voter who leans more conservative in 2018, if you didn't like Donald Trump, the only thing you could do was vote for the Democratic congressional candidate. That was the top of the ballot. in 2020, you could vote for Joe Biden and then vote for the congressional candidate you actually kind of agree with on most things. And so that's where I think we saw the split ticket really not go in our favor. Now for us, like there were still districts that we had Democratic candidates outperform Joe Biden, even if we didn't win. So that's not across the board. But in those Orange County seats, I think that's what happened. I think we were really, I think our incumbent Democrats were hurt by not having a COVID relief bill passed before the election. However, I think Donald Trump was also hurt by not having a COVID relief bill passed before the election. So, and then honestly, our data was off. Like, we were investing in races we had no business investing in. Our polling was off. Like, we got to figure out what happened with the polling, and I don't know the answer to that yet, but our data was bad.
So okay, you just answered that question I was about to ask. So we have a couple of specific questions about the COVID relief bill. Does the bill have assistance for funeral costs?
I'm not sure. I don't think so, but I can double check and get back to you.
All right. And the other question is, will people on Social Security, SSDI, SSI, and vet benefits, will they still be getting another check, or is that something that might get bartered away?
At the moment, it's the same criteria as the CARES Act, which means they will, if they were eligible under the CARES Act. That is likely to stay. Good news, if you're a VA or Social Security beneficiary, usually Republicans aren't trying to take away your checks right now, because a lot of their base are also benefiting from those. So far, that's not something that they have brought up as an issue, but who knows with them.
Yeah, who knows with them could be the motto for 2022. I know you have a couple of more minutes. In your opinion, looking at the Republican Party, who knows with them, what's the future who's the future for the party? Is it Marjorie Taylor Greene or is it Liz Cheney?
That's something they're going to have to figure out for themselves. I don't know the answer. I hope it's neither. I hope it's Peter Meijer and Nancy Mace. But I think they have a lot of internal work to do, and I don't know that I can predict how it's going to go.
What is it about those two people that you find appealing and would hope would be the future of the party?
We don't agree on a lot of things, for sure, but they're thoughtful and they care. And where we disagree, it's not out of malice. It's out of a differing philosophy on how to improve things. And they are willing to go against the worst instincts of their party and their base to do the right thing. So, Nancy Mace really helped lead efforts against the objection to the Electoral College. Peter Meijer was one of the 10 Republicans who voted for impeachment. I just think they're really thoughtful and they care. And I can work with people who are thoughtful and care, who I disagree with. What I can't work with is the people who just have no conception of reality, who don't care about who they hurt in the quest for power.
Mm-hmm. All right, I have one more question. It's a big one. It merits more than 2 minutes, but 2 minutes I think is what we have. Tech regulation, the whole issue of Facebook, Google, Amazon, even Apple to some extent. What's your vision for how we balance free speech and free markets on the one hand with regulation on the other?
Well, in some ways, I think it's a bit of a false dichotomy. I think it's clear that we need to have more foundational rules set by the government, because right now we're basically abdicating the responsibility of government for controlling the public sphere to private companies that have a profit motive. So I was part of a letter with Congresswoman Anna Eshoo and Congressman Tom Malinowski calling on the tech companies to change the way they do their algorithms so that they're not prioritizing the information that gets the most reaction, because that tends to be the most extreme. We know that there are studies that if you, on any video you go to on YouTube, if you leave it for 7 auto plays, you'll get to some extreme content by the 7th one, if not before. So we definitely need to do more regulation around how we do content moderation, who gets to decide that, what we're incentivizing. But I don't think it's like the kind of either or that it's being made to seem right now. I think there are, in a lot of ways, they themselves don't want to be the ones making those decisions, as we've seen by the fact that Facebook has created this oversight board that's supposed to be seemingly independent from them. Now, we'll see how it goes. They just did their first decisions. They're reviewing the Trump decision. And I think that will be the first big test case. But I actually think there's space to do something like that, but as an international organization, where you're really creating these kinds of governance and oversight models that have accountability, because that's what's missing when you're having private companies make these decisions. You don't have that accountability structure. But if we can build that accountability in, and if we can figure out how to do data privacy in a way that will actually work, which is not just putting the burden on the consumer to understand clicking yes or no before they go on every website, because like I understand data privacy and even I get to a website and like, sure, yeah, cookies, I don't care, I'm busy.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of these foundational things we need to do. And I think that it's possible to do them without killing innovation and, really disrupting society as we know it more than it already has been by the existing social media.
Okay. All right. And it's now 7:31, so I believe you have to go.
I do. It's 10:31 here, so I have one more meeting after this, and then hopefully I can call it.
Well, get some rest, and thank you for representing us and for being here this evening.
Thank you, and it's so great to see you all. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right. So I believe our next guest is Rebecca Fielding Miller. I don't know if she's in the audience. I have hidden the members window here. The little thingy that tells me who's in the audience is hidden. Heavens. There we go. I'm going to search on the name Rebecca. There you are. Yay. I'm going to ask you to unmute. You are unmuted.
Hello.
Thank you for joining. Thank you, Dr. Fielding Miller, for joining us. So I'm gonna do a quick introduction, let people know who you are real fast, and then we can jump right in. Rebecca Fielding Miller is an assistant professor at the University of California, San Diego, specializing in public health, infectious disease, and global public health. She's also a faculty member on the Center of Gender Equity and Health. She studies the structural drivers of COVID-19, HIV, and gender-based violence in the US and sub-Saharan Africa, with a focus on the intersection of race, gender, and economic inequality. She has a PhD in behavioral science and health education from Emory University and an MSPH in international health with a focus on social and behavioral interventions from the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She served as a Peace Corps volunteer in South Africa from 2006 to 2008 and is a Fulbright scholar in Swaziland in 2013 to 2014. Welcome again, Dr. Fielding Miller.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
That was quite an introduction. In addition to all of those things and more immediately relevant, I'm also the mother of a 3-year-old. So if you hear some light screaming in the background, it's because it's bath time.
Usually I'm the one who's screaming on these meetings. So it'll be a nice change for the members.
Esther's going to have you popped, I think. So I'm so glad to join you, and gosh, Sara Jacobs is quite an act to follow, so I'm going to do my best. I'm really happy to be here tonight, and I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about sort of the state of vaccines and some things that we're thinking about as public health professionals who are interested in things like equity and racial equity and social justice, and what vaccine and what a just and progressive vaccine rollout looks like. I don't plan to talk at you for 20 minutes. I was thinking to just like chat a little bit and then leave some time for questions, because in my experience, there's kind of a lot of questions around all this. But I just, and if I miss anything that's been happening in the last 48 hours, vaccine-wise, I know there's always a lot of updates at the local level. Please forgive me. It's actually because I have been writing a grant around vaccine, around vaccine rollout. So I'm sorry if I'm missing minutia, but I have the big picture, I promise. So I think everybody is now a vaccine expert, certainly more than we were 6 months ago. But just to give you a sense of things, there's currently two vaccines that have received authorization in the United States, the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. And like you guys were talking about, both of them are 2-dose vaccines, so you need both of them. And the other thing that is really important to know about them is they have to be stored at really, really, really cold temperatures. They need some pretty specialized storage. They can't just go in like a mini fridge that you would pick up at Target. So that creates a couple of really interesting problems when we think about how to make sure that all the right people get that vaccine. It means that those vaccines can only be out of their fancy refrigeration for about 4 hours. So if you go somewhere more than 2 hours away from where the fancy refrigeration is, all of a sudden you only have 2 more hours to get those vaccines into arms. So you have to be extremely careful about making sure you have signups, you have registration of people to get vaccinated before you take those things out of the fridge. The other issue with having a 2-dose vaccine is adults are hard to track down. Boy, y'all are tough to keep track of. And so it's really hard to get people to do something once and even harder to get them to do something twice. Not you guys are all clamoring for your second dose, but I'm going to just suggest lightly here that y'all are not your average citizen. For one thing, you are semi-easily able to navigate a series of online meetings that requires some amount of tech savvy. So making sure that people get their second dose, that we can keep track of them, is really hard. And when the vaccine has some kind of unpleasant side effects, nothing dramatic, but like you might feel kind of crummy is the technical term for a few days afterwards. It's even harder for people to say, I wasn't sure about getting the vaccine the first time around, and then I didn't feel great, and I'm just not going to go that second time. So there's a lot of challenges to a 2-dose vaccine. All the ones that Representative Jacobs laid out, and then the ones that have to do with the fact that we're people. So you might have just seen that another vaccine, the Johnson & Johnson Jensen Vaccine, was approved, and that it had less good efficacy. So it was 72% effective, which means that of the, I forget the exact number, but let's say of the 200 people that got COVID in the life of the trial, 72% of them were in the placebo arm, but like some people who got the vaccine did still get COVID. It wasn't, the graph wasn't as like beautiful as the Moderna graph, but 72% less likely to get COVID is really, really good. And the nice thing about the Johnson & Johnson is it's only one shot and it doesn't have to be stored at these ultra low temperatures. So this is an amazing vaccine for South Africa, where I've done a lot of work, for rural areas, for places where cold storage is really hard. And it means by default, you have twice as many doses to go around. And so if you think about it as a slider, let's say we can get 20% of people vaccinated at 95% effectiveness, or 40% of people vaccinated at 72% effectiveness. On a population level, you want that second one. That second one means that your hospitals aren't overflowing. It means the person you are running into in the grocery store is half as likely to be shedding a lot of COVID virus. It's actually a really good thing. And so my request to you, when you all go out into the world and you're talking about COVID vaccines, as the experts and the leaders that you are, is we're going to start hearing a little bit of pushback around, oh, I don't want a vaccine that's only 70% good. I want one that's 95% good. But you, as experts and leaders, now understand why that Johnson & Johnson vaccine is an amazing game changer. And I charge you with explaining the basics of public health and why you definitely want to get that 70% effective vaccine. And maybe 5 years from now, you can get a booster when we're not rationing, and that'll be great too. Because also, nobody in the Johnson & Johnson trial became very, very ill or died, which is a really good thing, and we want that. So we're hoping that we'll have authorization for that third vaccine in probably a few weeks. And in the meantime, the other two things I wanted to talk to you guys about was just kind of how to talk to folks who are a little bit hesitant about vaccines in general. But also, I wanted to leave you thinking about the ways in which we're rolling out this vaccine. So in general, this is going to be kind of amazing, but it turns out people don't change their minds when you yell at them and tell them they're stupid. I know, I have a whole PhD in it, like it blows your mind, but it's true. Even when you get frustrated with people, when you know that you are right, objectively right, and they are objectively wrong, explaining to people that they're dumb doesn't change their mind. The thing that changes people's minds, the thing that encourages them to consider getting that vaccine that you do want them to get, because it means one less person walking around shedding virus, shutting down our health systems and putting people you care about at risk. The thing that convinces people is just listening to them. People have concerns that are in some ways rooted in real things, right? We've heard these myths about the COVID vaccine might affect fertility. It doesn't, let's be really clear. They will not affect your fertility. There's no reason to think that. But there is a history of the government, the US government in particular, doing experiments on women of color that ended in sterilization and forced birth control use. That's a thing the government has done. And so when you hear communities of color in particular expressing concerns about that, it's not coming out of nowhere. So the best thing you can do is just listen to people about their concerns. The microchip thing, I have honestly had somebody bring to me. And the best thing I knew how to do was just kind of listen, tell them what I knew about vaccine trials, and then kind of jokingly, we agreed that it might actually be pretty hard to get a microchip through a syringe, and your phone was much more effective anyway. But that wouldn't have worked if it was the first thing I said, right? If I hadn't spent a long time actually listening to them until we were on the same page and they knew that I cared about their concerns, they would have just seen me as making fun of them and they would have shut down. But because I listened first and then we kind of talked through the silliness of it, then they were receptive. So the last thing I want to leave you with kind of ties into that, where people's concerns are coming from. And there have been a lot of conversations about how we decide who gets the vaccine next. I know there's a lot of comments today about teachers and when teachers get the vaccine. And my understanding is in San Diego County, y'all are up really soon, like within a week or two. It's coming, I promise, I promise. But you know, before all of a sudden I was a COVID researcher, I was an HIV researcher. And the history of HIV can really predict the future of COVID if we're not very, very mindful about making sure that doesn't happen. And the history of HIV is a history of marginalized communities for HIV, Haitians and who have sex with men, people who inject drugs, really bearing the brunt of the epidemic, of people of color in sub-Saharan Africa and in the US South still bearing the brunt of the epidemic, while wealthier white people got access to medications first and faster. And we're seeing that happen with COVID vaccines too, right? Even in really impoverished areas. So South Bay has its own vaccine superstation right now that's coming, if it's not already up. But I guarantee you there's still going to be a differential in who's getting vaccinated in that South Bay vaccination superstation. And so if we don't purposefully build in ways to make sure that people who are undocumented, people who can't navigate pretty complicated website registration processes, people who are worried about public charge, people who don't speak English or Spanish, if we don't deliberately make sure that vaccination systems work for them, then I guarantee you they will fall through the cracks. And we don't want that because it's an airborne infectious disease. And if all of us don't get protected, then none of us are protected. And there's really a race to do it quickly, because the longer more people go unvaccinated, the more of an opportunity there is for these new variants to come up and that might potentially be less effective about the vaccine. So it's really in all of our best interest to make sure that we are very, very thoughtfully designing systems that genuinely prioritize people who would otherwise be at the end of the line, because that's the only way that all of us are going to be safe and protected. So I see there's like 21 questions in the chat since bath time started. So I'll pause at that because I bet there's just a lot of conversation we can have. And Mitch, it seems like you do a really good job of driving Q&A from the chat. So I'll let you.
Oh, thank you. Yes. All right. So how long after teachers are vaccinated can we safely open schools that are worried about opening too soon?
So I'll give you two answers. One is that the technical correct answer for when your vaccine is at full effectiveness for you as an individual is 2 weeks after your second shot. That's when you are technically considered vaccinated, if I'm like writing a paper on the prevalence of vaccination. We also know that we probably need like 70% vaccination rates. I've actually seen the number range from 20% to 70% for it to work for everybody. I will tell you that I have been working on a project looking at how we can detect COVID-19 early in schools. And without getting into it too much, because we're still analyzing the data, I have actually been quite comforted at the low levels of secondary spread we've seen in schools. I can tell you that masking appears to be extremely effective. This is little kids, by the way. High school, middle school, whole different deal. But elementary and preschool, the masking actually seems pretty effective. It's not 100%, but what I've seen makes me actually feel comforted for my friends who are in classrooms right now. I will also tell you that I am wearing a KN95 every day right now, and I ship 2 boxes to my parents, and this would be a good time to up your masking game. So I wish I could give you a better answer than that. All I can tell you is here are the factors that I'm seeing that would go into that decision.
Okay, we got a question from Doug Case in the audience, and I thought of a related question, which is, his question is, should we double mask? And my question is like, what's a good mask? You know, there was a political commentator who said at one point, why hasn't the government just put out a list? Here are the masks you should buy. Because I look on Amazon, I don't know what to buy.
Oh, it's so messy. So let's see. This, this is a KN95. This is what I have my family in. This is what I mailed to my parents. So N95 masks are what you'll see in healthcare settings. I'm actually not sure if we're in the same state as we were in spring, but I'll just say you probably should not buy and honestly cannot buy N95s right now. KN95s are pretty widely available. You can buy them on Amazon. There is actually a list from the FDA. KN95s are manufactured in China. And there's a list that the FDA puts out of which factories are putting out this type of mask that the FDA approves of. So this is sort of roughly equivalent to an N95. So you can buy these on Amazon. I will actually, I'm happy to look and find the list because it takes a second and send it to you guys. So what I do is I look at that list of FDA approved factories, I go on Amazon and I make sure that I'm buying a mask that's manufactured in one of those factories that's approved by the FDA. If you want to double mask, these are actually a little tricky because they're kind of pointy. You can put another mask over it, just like a cloth mask. And what that does is protects it a little bit. Technically, they're not reusable. I reuse them because I don't leave the house. I wear them when I'm like going for a walk around the neighborhood and I don't feel worried about reusing that mask. But if you are like working with people every day, then yeah, absolutely reuse it. Get a new one every 4 hours. And make sure you wash your hands anytime you touch it, for sure.
You say you mask when you walk around the neighborhood. I walk around the neighborhood. I don't see many people around here. So if people are just 20 feet away,
yeah, is
that reasonable to not mask? Or
well, I do it for a couple of reasons. One, it's airborne, and you know, this new UK variant we know is more contagious, and you just never know when you're going to walk past somebody that you can't avoid being close to them. The other, though, is because we talk about this idea of social norms in public health, which is basically a really fancy way of saying peer pressure. And the more people that you see wearing masks, the more likely it is to feel really normal in your head. So if everybody is around you is wearing masks and you're not wearing one, then you kind of feel like a jerk. But if you're the only one wearing a mask and nobody else is, then you feel kind of weird. So I wear a mask when I leave the house because, like, I don't want to get COVID, but also because I want to make mask wearing really, really visible in my neighborhood. And I feel like that's a small thing that I can do to try and keep my neighbors safe.
Okay. So is the vaccine safe for pregnant and breastfeeding women?
So pregnant and breastfeeding women were not enrolled in any of the trials, which is something that I can complain about for a really long time in another meeting. But the recommendation from the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists is women who are in sort of a high-risk situation. So women who are healthcare providers, women who are kind of working in the front lines. The risk of COVID is so much higher than any potential risk of the vaccine that it is recommended that those women get vaccinated. There's also, to my knowledge, no reason why a vaccine would cause any issues in breast milk. We try to be really, really careful. We don't have evidence that it causes any problems, but we don't have evidence that it doesn't. Do you know what I mean? So I would never say it's recommended without evidence, but if I were pregnant and I worked in healthcare, I would get it. I can tell you that.
Yeah. So we've got a question here. What do you do when 70% of the people in your apartment complex are anti-maskers? I am called the sheeple, the vampire. There's nothing to say to them. I'm from New York. I know what to say to them, but Dr. Fielding Miller has discouraged that. So
I know that's really hard. I think that your primary responsibility as an individual, and maybe as somebody who lives and interacts with other people, is to keep yourself safe. And so just know that you're doing a good job wearing a mask. And if I lived in a situation where a lot of people around me weren't masking, I would definitely up my mask game for sure. Get a box of these. If you feel that you have a good enough relationship with any of your neighbors that you can have a conversation, then, it's worth a try coming from a place of curiosity and empathy. If you don't feel like you have that relationship, then the best you can do is ignore them. And this will not last forever. I promise. It's not going to last forever. One day we're going to look back and be like, whoa, that was weird. That was so weird, but it's not happening anymore.
Let's look forward to that day coming sooner rather than later. So if you get COVID and you get better, do you still need to get the vaccine?
Yeah, so we know that there's some amount of immunity conferred from having COVID, but it's really variable. So if you had, for example, a really, really light case, you had like a little bit of a cough, a little bit of a fever, you were otherwise fine, then you might not have really strong immunity. Your body might not have built up a lot of a defense system against it. It also could just happen, like reinfection happens. And so I think that if you have had it in the past, but you have an opportunity to get vaccinated, you should absolutely take that opportunity, because we don't know how long natural immunity lasts. And we don't know how immune you are based on how sick you were in that particular case.
Okay. So we have another question about the schools, particularly about moderate and severe special education teachers in Coronado Unified have been vaccinated. How is this possible, and will the other 21 school districts in San Diego be prioritizing special education teachers as well?
I don't know. That's a good question. I will tell you that Coronado doesn't surprise me for two reasons. One, it's small, so that's easier. Two, all the things I just talked about who is going to end up getting vaccinated first, right? It's going to be a lot longer before folks in lower income and bigger districts are vaccinated at the level of Coronado. If I were in charge, which I'm not, but if I were, yeah, I would make sure that people who are already in the classroom, people who serve kids who need to be in a classroom, I would put them in the front of the line. I'm not completely in charge, but I would hope that schools can work with the county to make sure that at the very least, that the ability to access those vaccines is facilitated for teachers who need it the most.
Okay. So another question about masks here. If you go to the grocery store, can you reuse that KN95 mask? What if you put a cloth mask over it?
Yeah. So these are like $5 each, which is not going to break the bank, but it's not something you want to throw away every time. So if you feel like it is something you want to reuse, yeah, I would put a cloth mask over it. You can also, if you have a few, you can kind of like put it out, honestly, in the sun for a few days or for a day, and just sort of rotate through a few of them. If you can afford to use a new one, to throw that one out and use a new one, then that would be preferable.
Okay. So what can we do about world inequities to the vaccines? Making sure that third world countries are not getting supplies.
Yeah. So I think it's something that we have to be really mindful of. And again, I think a lot about the history of HIV access and treatment. So South Africa, India, Brazil only got mass access to affordable HIV treatment after some pretty intense protests. In fact, Brazil and India went rogue, basically, declared they didn't care about the patents, people were dying, and they were going to manufacture their own ARVs because like the formulas were out there, they were just patented. And it really took that and a massive amount of advocacy from groups like Treatment Action Campaign in South Africa, ACT UP here in the US, to make sure that pharmaceutical companies were held to account in ensuring that people everywhere could access life-saving medications, whether or not they could afford to pay for it. And I'm teaching global health this term, which is quite a term to teach global health. And we just talked about the Salk vaccine, which was the vaccine for polio. And Jonas Salk was asked if he would patent it and make money off it. And I think he said something along the lines of like, you can just as soon patent sunlight. It would be immoral to patent something and make money off something that can save so many lives. And billions of your money, billions and billions of dollars of US taxpayer money went into making these vaccines. And I think it would be nice to see some of my tax money used not to help Johnson & Johnson or Pfizer turn a profit, but to make sure that people I care about in South Africa and India and Brazil get to live a little bit of a longer and healthier life.
Okay, so I have two more questions for you, and then I think we'll let you go. This intersects kind of all of your areas of specialization, really. In my layman's research as just a person who reads the news, one thing I've picked up is that AIDS, people fighting AIDS in the 80s were basically quickly coming to the insight that you can't just tell people to be celibate, right? You can tell people to be safer, but you can't tell people to be safe, or just zero tolerance. And now here we are again, and there are parallels.
Yeah.
So yeah, can you talk about that a little bit? What's reasonable to expect of people, and what can people do if they gotta go see somebody? They just need a hug, for God's sake.
I know. So I think we talk about that as a harm reduction model, right? And it's very clear, just like you said, that harm reduction works a lot better than abstinence. It's a lot more effective to tell people, obviously the safest thing you can do is sit in your house and not go anywhere. But if you are going to socialize, here are ways to do it safely. And so when I'm talking with people, I do preface with, it is safer not to go and see your friends. But if you are going to see your friends, please make sure you can do it outdoors with good ventilation. Please make sure you do it masked. If you're going to be doing something like eating, bring your own food and sit 10 feet away. here are strategies to be safe, even if you are not being compliant, as some people would like you to be. And so when I'm thinking about harm reduction in my own life, I think about ventilation. Outside is always better than inside. I think about numbers. The fewer the people, the better. I think about transparency and communication. So do I have really good communication with these people? Do we all feel comfortable being honest with one another about what activities we've been engaged in the previous few days? Because a lot of people think about their bubble and just kind of, I have a bubble, done, never address it again, but I promise you your bubble is not real. Just if you take away nothing else, I promise you your bubble is not real. You need constant communication about what people are up to if you're interacting with them in person.
Okay, and the final question is the one that I don't think any expert ever wants to answer, but I'm going to give it a shot anyway. When is this going to be over? When can we just like meet in person as a club at the La Mesa Community Center?
I know. You know, before these new variants, I would have said late spring, early summer, honestly. This new UK variant is a little bit worse. So we are seeing numbers drop dramatically from where they were over the holidays. There was a huge spike. The end of December, beginning of January was really, really bad. And we're seeing those numbers come down to where they were in late November again. It's a really dramatic drop too. So as people get vaccinated, as those numbers come down from that kind of triple whammy of Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, things are going to improve. The problem is these new variants that can increase infectiousness substantially. And I work really closely with Dr. Natasha Martin, who's been in the Union Tribune a couple of times talking about her modeling. And there's real concern that we're going to start seeing extraordinarily high numbers in the late spring because of these new variants. So that said, we do think that there will be enough vaccine for everybody by summer, early fall. And so the race really is to make sure, again, that there is equitable vaccine access, that documentation is not a barrier, that public charge is not a barrier, that inability to navigate a website or get in your car and drive to a superstation are not barriers. And so really the race, and I think this is a good race for a group of politically minded people, is making sure that everybody has access as quickly as possible, because that is the only thing that's going to end this.
Okay. All right. On that note, I wish we had a happier ending for this, but I bet you do too. So.
But you know, it is though, because that's not impossible. It's not impossible for us to do that. We traditionally don't unless we do it on purpose, but it is not impossible to say, please don't include a request for a social security number on your website where you're registering for vaccines. Mm-hmm. It is not impossible to say, we're going to set up volunteers to help people register for their vaccines. That's not impossible. It's a little bit hard, but we've been doing hard things for a year. We can do this.
Yeah. We have at least a president in the White House who is not actually trying to undermine efforts.
That's a lot better.
So even if he gets a D-, that's light years better than what we have been doing.
Give him a solid B+, honestly.
Yeah. Oh, well, that's a whole nother line of questioning, but we've taken up too much of your time. Let's go for it. What the heck? B+, why a B+?
Well, first of all, he's not actively undermining things at every turn, so that's really solid. It was really lovely to be able to watch a press conference led by the NIH and the CDC and be getting actual accurate information. Like I said, I'm writing a grant right now, and it was really lovely to be able to just like go to the CDC website for good, accurate information on what's happening in the country. And the other thing that I've been noticing out of this administration is there is actually a real commitment to equity, at least on paper so far. So the new head of the CDC has a pretty strong background in racial health disparities, which is exactly who you want in charge right now. There does seem to be a mindfulness that there is an opportunity to get this really wrong in terms of health disparities, unless we try really hard not to. So it's not an A+, but I think there's some really solid effort in there, and yeah, I give it a solid B+.
Okay. Any final words?
think that's it. Wear a mask
All
and
right.
wash your hands and help your friends get vaccinated.
Great. Those are good final words. Thank you very much, Dr. Fielding Miller.
Thank you.
So I'm reminded of two quotes right now. One is from my friend, the science fiction writer and journalist Cory Doctorow, who says there is no peeing and non-peeing end of the pools. That relates to equity and the importance of vaccinating the poor. And the other one is from Winston Churchill, who said Americans always do the right thing after they've tried everything else. All right, so our next speaker, closer to home, is board member and past president of the club, Linda Armacost, who has some business to tend to, some of it related to me. Ooh. Linda, take it. Linda, you're muted. I need to unmute you. Killed the timing on that take it there. I'm distraught. All right, you're
Yay.
Unmuted.
Thank you, Mitch, and welcome, and thanks for staying with us. We do have some important things to do. Some of it relates to Mitch. At our board meeting in January, we made two decisions. One was to elevate Mitch Wagner, because of all of his incredible work doing this, to VP for Communications. Well-deserved. And I know you all will agree with me and approve that. The second excellent decision we made, and we're so glad he said yes, was to welcome Professor Rick Epps to the board. If you're not familiar with him, he has spoken here before. He's an amazing political genius. And I think his input and just years of experience will be a huge, huge boost to the club and to our board. So having said that, here's the thing. We can have 7 board members at large based on our membership. I won't bore you with all the details. So having Mitch move to VP of Communications opens up the slot for Professor Epps. So I would entertain, I don't know how I'm going to do this, a motion to approve Mitch Wagner as VP for Communications and Rick Epps for board member at large. Can somebody move?
I got to unmute. Yeah, somebody raise your hand with the raise hand button if you want to move that, and we'll see it in the in the participants window. So wow, we have 3 hands raised. So let's say, all right, we've got many hands raised. Good.
Okay, so we have a move and obviously a second. So everybody who is in favor, raise your hand, say yes. Yay.
Yeah, hit the hand raise button if you're in favor.
Oh, where is that, by the way? The hand raise button.
Good question. I don't know. I never use it. I just tell other people to use it. All right.
No, never mind. Thank you. Congratulations, Mitch.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I know Rick's on here somewhere, so welcome. We look forward to having you with us. The second, and we also, and I'm hoping Jeff Benish is still with us, because we made another decision, and that was to award Jeff Benish an honorary lifetime membership to the Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club for all of his hard work, dedication, and wonderful, wonderful programming. So congratulations, Jeff. Hope you're still with us. Well deserved. Yay. The other thing is really exciting. I want to talk about bylaws. Woohoo. Everybody gets excited. No, bylaws.
Yay, bylaws.
I know. They're very important. They're sort of the legal policy structure for our club. And we really hadn't had a true rewrite until our previous VP for Laws and Legislation, Marge Saber, took that on. And bless her for doing that. So we made a few changes. Some of the revisions we had voted on incrementally, like changing the notification times for announcements from 30 days down to 14 days. And we also increased the monthly discretionary monies for the board activities, instead of having to come to the membership for everything, to $999.99. So beyond that, the membership needs to approve. The other major rewrite excuse me, had to deal with candidate endorsement. Until recently, we were under the misimpression that our endorsement meeting votes had to be public, as the county votes are. And so we went through that horrible rigmarole, standing up, and that is not true. So we can now vote by secret ballot. And if that happens, there are provisions about how that will work, 1 to 2 rounds. The kicker here, though, is that we also adopted a club policy, and it is the general policy of the Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club not to endorse in the primary elections where 2 or more Democrats are running. And my input is that California's jungle primary system, which we all hate, it actually encourages dem-on-dem fighting. And it's the board's decision not to encourage that infighting wherever possible. This doesn't preclude that if we have an absolute wacko running, that we can't dismiss that person. Other than that, the only other major rewrite was about statements made on the behalf of the club, so that, you know, someone couldn't run out and say something and pretend that this was the club's position. So anybody who wants it, I will send you a copy of the bylaws for your nighttime pleasure reading if you wish. Any questions you can direct to me. And I'm really glad that this is done. Yay. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Is there anything else you need to share with the club?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yes. When we, what we're doing now is planning for, you might want to mention this too, Mitch or Tina, what we're going to do in March and looking ahead to April. So we're trying to work on programming for the future. If you want to make any comments on that, I think next month we have.
Yeah, next month we have, we're going to be looking at the 79th Assembly District race. We're going to be having Democratic candidates speak about that. I believe the primary is in April and the general is in June.
June 6th, right.
Yeah. And then in April, we're looking at possibility of getting some speakers on the subject of education, and also possibly a couple of people from the La Mesa City Council to come and talk about what's going on in our town here.
Oh, Chris asked in the chat room, yes, incumbent friendly endorsements, as we've done before, like when Sarah runs again, boom, she's endorsed, that kind of thing. So we're not starting from scratch in there. We're just making a couple of adjustments to that. So that's one thing.
What about races with a Democratic incumbent and a Democratic challenger? So if someone decides to challenge Congresswoman Jacobs.
Under our bylaws, the incumbent is preferred. What we did in the past was kind of like chicken out, and we said, well, we're going to wait till the county party makes their decision and you know, step on there. But no, I think the friendly incumbent is still going to prevail for our club.
Yeah, and of course, any member of the board or member of the club is free as an individual to endorse and work and volunteer on behalf of any candidate, even in a primary.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So I think that's it. Anything else, Linda?
Not that I can think of. Just hoping to get that second shot.
Okay. Yeah, we have a question from Carol Perkins. What are we planning to do about a La Mesa council seat when Aquila runs for her mother's seat? Good question. I don't think we've really kind of addressed that yet. And Cheryl has a friendly incumbent question. Cheryl, why don't I just unmute you so you can speak?
Hi, yes, sorry. My question is, what if and I'm thinking smaller races, what if the incumbent changes their party to no party preference?
They're gone. And we can only endorse Democrats. We can find no party preference people acceptable if there's no Democrat running against them. We did that for Art Madrid, and we approved him, and then he lost. Cheryl, by the way, great pick on our speaker, Dr. Felix. She was wonderful. She was wonderful. So
She is amazing.
good
I
job.
agree. She's very.
Oh, the other thing I was going to say about the Dem on Dem thing, what we've done in the past, what I would encourage, and I hope other clubs would do, and the county, we have forums. If you remember when Sara Jacobs was running, and we had a forum of all the candidates. This is how we do it, so that you, the members, go, wow, I like that person. Make up your own mind instead of superimposing a decision on you. So that's.
So one other question, because this, and I only asked because it specifically happened in my race. The incumbent was a Democrat, and then the county party, endorsed myself and two other people instead of the incumbent. And at that point, she had switched to no party preference. And I actually didn't even realize it until a couple weeks before the election. But at that point, you guys had already done the friendly incumbent endorsement of my opponent. I'm just wondering the procedure in that case. Would you then pull the endorsement had we realized it soon enough?
I guess I'm not. So let's say.
It was a very weird situation.
Right. Well, we're, like I said, unless there's like one person and a friendly incumbent, we're not going to endorse. We're going to have a forum like we're going to do next month, 79th AD forum. Everybody gets to hear all of the candidates, and then it'll be up to the membership to decide who they want to support. Now, that's not to say the county, as they did last time, could endorse people that other people wouldn't support and wouldn't walk and knock on doors for, so we can't control what the county does. We can just, control our own actions. So.
Okay. So we have a question. All right. So we have a question. We have a question from Laura wanting to know if she can make our club her home primary Dem club if she is also an indivisible. And the answer to that is yes. We love you, Laura. Join us.
Yes.
And I'm gonna let's see.
Oh,
Michelle
great.
has her hand. Michelle has her hand up, so I'm gonna unmute Michelle and see.
Hi. Good
Michelle.
evening.
Hey, Michelle.
Hi. Just a clarification on the endorsement policy within the party. I'm actually going to be running an endorsing caucus for the 79th through the California Democratic Party. Those are the state party is the only one that does the Democratic Party official endorsement when it comes to partisan races like Assembly District, Senate, or Congress. And that election within our party will be happening this Monday night. It's very rushed, but we had no choice because we have to get the Democratic endorsement in to the register of voters in order for it to be in the sample ballot by February 11th. So this Monday night at 5 p.m., so Monday, February 8th, there will be a California Democratic Party endorsing caucus for the 79th. Just an FYI, because people were talking about the county party doing endorsements in the assembly races, but that does not happen.
Okay, great. Thank you,
That's
Michelle. I'm gonna let's move on. We have other people who need to speak. So let's move on from the subject of endorsements and such. And thank you again. So now we're going to make time for local leaders to talk about things that are important for us to know about. And we're going to actually start with Stephen Houlihan, who I think was expecting to speak tonight, but perhaps not expecting at this moment because we didn't tell him. So I'm going to unmute Stephen and
well,
welcome.
thank you, Mitch. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak and to be here today. Again, my name's Stephen Houlihan. I am a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse for near 25 years now. I am also the president of a group called Save Mission Trails. Many of you may remember that there was a attempt to build a power plant at Mission Trails Regional Park, and we stood up and we stopped that power plant from being built. I also served on the Santee City Council for 4 years as a city council member, 1 year as the vice mayor of Santee. And I'm proud to announce that I am running for the 50th U.S. Congressional District. And so I'm here tonight before you just to announce that, to let you know that in fact I am running. I believe that as a registered nurse, I have a science-based approach that I would like to apply to government. I am a Democrat. So if I see there was a question about that. So I'm glad to hear about the processes as far as endorsements and such. I would be very happy to be part of whatever process and be able to speak before you about where I'm coming from. So absolutely an honor to be here. To hear what happened in Congress is just ground shaking, especially what happened on January 6th. To hear from an expert in vaccinations and epidemiology, also spectacular. So great program by this group, well organized, and just a pleasure to be here. And if I'm able, I'd take any questions if anyone had any.
Do we have any questions for Stephen? Stephen is a Democrat, by the way. We have a couple of questions in chat. He said that, but I'll repeat it. All right, looks like we have no questions. Thank you very much, Stephen, and good luck in the race.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
I should unmute myself. That's what I should do. We have Doug Case wants to speak next, so I'm going to unmute Doug. And
okay, thank you. My name is Doug Case. I am the Political Affairs Director for Senate President Pro Tem Tony Atkins. I want to give a brief legislative update. As most of you, I'm sure, are aware, the legislature last week approved Dr. Shirley Weber as Secretary of State. And you may have seen in yesterday's paper that the Pro Tem appointed San Diego City Council member Monica Montgomery Stepp to the State Reparations Task Force that Shirley Weber shepherded through the legislature. Much of what the legislature is doing right now has to do with COVID. The budget proposal includes a $600 in stimulus checks to the very low income California residents. You may have also seen the last week, last week, the legislature approved and the governor assigned $2.6 billion in rental assistance to tenants and small landlords, and also extended the eviction moratorium until the end of June. The budget proposal also includes tax credits and grants for small businesses, as well as $2 billion to safely reopen schools, and some one-time funds for emergency preparedness and wildfire prevention. The Senate also has introduced a series of housing production bills, and for the sake of time, I'll put a link to that in the chat. And finally, some of the bills that didn't make it over the finish line last year, including Senator Bradford's on a certification of police officers so that an officer could be decertified if they're found guilty of misconduct in one jurisdiction and they couldn't be hired in a different. That bill's been reintroduced and hopefully through and be the governor this year. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
thank you very much. So next we have Shane Parmelee. I hope I'm pronouncing that name correctly. I'm going to unmute you. Lost track of you in the attendee list. Try that again. All right. Having a little bit of problem with this technology thing here. Oh, good grief. Shane, oh, here we go. Okay, good. You should be, there you go. Oh no, this is such fun. It's like the world's worst video game here. I'm just clicking away and nothing's happening. Thank you, Shane. I will be quiet now and you can speak.
Hi there. So is it okay for candidates to make announcements? Because
yeah,
is
absolutely.
this the appropriate time?
Absolutely, yes.
Hi, Shane Parmelee. My pronouns are she, her, hers, or they, them, theirs, and I'm running for state assembly for 79. The question, I think it was Linda asked at the beginning, like, why are so many new people here? And I was trying to unmute. Michelle Krug has been telling me for years that I needed to come to the La Mesa Foothills Dem Club, and that it was this amazing club. And I'm a single mom, and I'm a teacher, and I'm involved in a lot of stuff, and I never quite made it out. But it's on Zoom, and this is easy. And then Sara Jacobs was talking tonight. I'm like trying to track her down for an appointment. So I'm glad that I finally made it out, and I'm glad you were talking about the Assembly 79 race. I'm running because I've been teaching for over 20 years, mostly in Title I schools. I see how housing, immigration, homelessness, food insecurity, racial profiling, mass incarceration affect our students, their families, our communities as a whole. And I spend most of my time outside of the classroom advocating on the national and state level and local level too, through NEA or CTA, or locally just through activism to address a lot of these issues. So I'm running. I'm happy to talk with anybody. I will be there on Monday at 5 o'clock for the Assembly 79 caucus endorsement, because I'm a state a representative to the state central committee. I'm also on the state e-board. And I do have a website up. It's not totally finished, but it'll give you a feel for me. It's shaneparmelee.com. And I have a Facebook page. So if you could take a few minutes to investigate me, I'd be happy to talk with anybody or answer questions if that's a thing. And I don't know if I talked too long, so sorry, there was no timer.
You were fine, Shane. Good luck in the election. We are going to be having a candidates night for the 79th Assembly District Wednesday, March 9th. So we hope to see you and hear from you again there and then. Please do. All right. I am looking right now through the attendee list to see if there are any more raised hands. If you do want to speak, please raise your hand. I am scrolling down, going once, going twice.
Go ahead, Tina.
Oh, wait. Oh, Evelyn, did you want to say something?
No, Tina's been waving to try get your attention.
Tina's been waving. Tina, speak, Tina. Speak out.
Okay, hi. I'm sorry, Mitch, but you misspoke. The forum for the 79 is March 3rd. It's 4 weeks from today.
I thought that was what I said, but that's fine.
You said the 9th.
Oh, well.
That's when I freaked out. That was the beginning of when
March 3rd. Thank you for correcting that, Tina. I have no idea why I said the 9th. My lips were meeting a life of their own.
We had somebody that was going to be there that we just told the wrong date. So yeah.
Yes.
March 4th or March 3rd, 4 weeks from tonight.
Okay, yes, I went to a public college, so that's why I blame things on. All right, anybody else wishing to speak to correct some egregious error that I have made? All right, so I think that does it for our business tonight then. Thank you very much for staying with us, and we hope to see you soon in real life. Join us for our next meeting, which is Wednesday, February 3rd. And look for a replay of this meeting on our YouTube channel. Just search for the Mesa-Foothills Democratic Club on YouTube and subscribe while you're there. Also, look for links to the video on our website, Facebook page, and Twitter account, or an email update very soon. The website is lamesafoothillsdemocraticclub.com, or if that's too much for you to type, lmfdems.com. The Facebook page is also the name of the club. We have a group also on Facebook, because on Facebook, you need a group and a page, because Facebook makes no sense. And search for the name there. On Twitter, we're LMFDems. And if you want to sign up for our email updates, go to the website and look for the Get Email Updates link at the top of the page. Thank you to the board for all their hard work arranging this meeting. Thank you to our speakers who were fantastic. Thank you to all of you in the audience who asked astoundingly good questions. I am proud to be on an event with all of you. Good night, everybody. Stay healthy, stay sane, and we will see you again soon. And yes, the meeting is March 3rd.